What if everything you've been told about intelligence is dead wrong? Imagine someone with an IQ of 140 who can't keep a job, and another with an average IQ building a billion-dollar company. That's not a fluke. In fact, studies show that IQ tests predict only about 20% of real-world success. So, what's the missing piece? What secret patterns are hidden inside the genius brain that no one ever talks about? Stay with me, because the most brilliant minds in history, from Tesla to Turing, shared one unnerving trait that you've likely never heard about. And it changes everything you think you know about what makes someone truly intelligent. By the end of this video, you'll know why raw IQ might actually blind you from higher-level thinking, how a dropout from MIT cracked the code for creative intelligence using doodles, the shocking reason some of the highest-functioning minds almost always borderline on madness, and what a 90-year-old study involving gifted children accidentally discovered that flips modern education on its head. You'll also learn the one cognitive trait more predictive of genius than IQ, grades, or even memory, and almost no one is measuring it. Ready to see intelligence from the inside out? Let's dive into the brain like you've never seen it before. Most people think intelligence is all about being born smart. You either have it or you don't, right? They imagine geniuses as kids solving complex math problems at 5, skipping grades and speaking 5 languages by the time they're 12. The classic image is of someone like Albert Einstein, who supposedly emerged from the womb ready to write physics equations. But here's the first twist. Einstein didn't talk fluently until he was 4. In fact, many of history's most brilliant minds started slow, were labeled average or even behind. So if intelligence isn't just a matter of early talent or high test scores, then what exactly is going on? What do we actually measure when we say someone is smart? And more importantly, what are we missing? Here's where the story gets strange. Intelligence, as we commonly define it, is mostly based on something called the G factor, a general intelligence score that emerged from statistical analysis over 100 years ago. But neuroscientists are discovering that this measure only scratches the surface. In functional MRI scans, genius-level thinkers don't necessarily show more brain activity. In fact, they often show less. Their brains are more efficient, not more active. That's right, being smarter might actually mean doing less. Even more bizarre? When researchers studied chess grandmasters, they found patterns of brain synchronization that looked more like meditation than mental exertion. It's as if their brains had learned to turn certain areas off in order to think better. What does this mean for our entire understanding of intelligence? And have we been measuring the wrong thing this entire time? To find out, researchers began diving deep into the neural architecture of high-functioning minds. What they found was shocking. Some of the most innovative thinkers show unusual activity in something called the default mode network, or DMN. This network lights up when the brain is at rest, daydreaming, or unfocused times we usually associate with laziness or inattention. But here's the twist. Geniuses engage this network more strategically, letting their minds wander with purpose. In one study, scientists found that Nobel Prize winners showed greater connectivity between the DMN and the executive control network, which governs focus and decision-making. Translation? The genius brain doesn't just toggle between on and off. It blurs the boundary between deep focus and idle thought, using both in tandem to make nonlinear, creative leaps. Could this be the reason why some of the most intelligent breakthroughs happen not at a desk, but during a walk, a shower, or even a nap? And if so, what does it say about how we train our brains for brilliance? But the rabbit hole goes even deeper. A famous longitudinal study, known as the Terman study, followed over 1,500 children with exceptionally high IQs, many above 140, for more than 70 years. These were the so-called termites, expected to become future leaders, innovators, and world changers. But here's the shocker. While some did achieve success, the majority led fairly ordinary lives. Meanwhile, several children who were rejected from the study because their IQs were too low ended up becoming Nobel laureates. Let that sink in. The very metric used to identify genius completely missed the real outliers. Why? Because it wasn't measuring the right kind of intelligence. It overlooked traits like divergent thinking, resilience, obsession, and even emotional range, the intangible qualities that fuel game-changing breakthroughs. So the question becomes, if traditional tests can't spot real genius, what else are we ignoring? And are the smartest people in our generation flying completely under the radar? One of the most overlooked predictors of genius? Cognitive disinhibition. Sounds technical, but here's what it means. The brain's filter system, the one that normally blocks irrelevant thoughts, runs a little looser in highly creative and intellectually gifted individuals. These are the people who notice patterns others ignore, connect dots no one else sees, and think in ways that often seem chaotic or even bizarre. Psychologists like Shelley Carson at Harvard have found that this trait allows more raw material to enter a person's conscious awareness, fueling unconventional insights. But there's a dark side. This same trait is also linked to mood disorders, schizophrenia, and even paranormal belief systems. So could it be that the very mechanism which powers genius is also what brings it dangerously close to madness? And if that's true, is intelligence really a gift? Or is it something far more volatile, unpredictable, and perhaps misunderstood? This brings us to a chilling realization. What if our obsession with neat metrics like IQ scores and GPA is actually steering society away from its most valuable minds? Think about it. The systems we use to identify intelligence, standardized tests, academic rankings, job performance metrics, are all designed to reward consistency, not originality. Yet history screams a different story. From Steve Jobs to Leonardo da Vinci, the minds that truly changed the world often defied structure, broke rules, and struggled within traditional systems. They weren't straight-A students. They didn't follow the manual, and yet they saw what others couldn't. So the real question becomes, are we unknowingly filtering out genius simply because it doesn't wear a cap and gown? Maybe the next Einstein isn't being nurtured in a lab but ignored in a classroom, misunderstood in a therapist's office, or quietly scripting code in their bedroom. And if that's true, then how many revolutions have we silenced in the name of keeping things measurable, standardized, and safe? Here's where the real paradigm shift begins. What if intelligence isn't a fixed trait, but a dynamic feedback loop between curiosity, failure, and obsession? Consider the case of Barbara McClintock, a geneticist who revolutionized biology by discovering jumping genes, but only after spending years in scientific isolation because no one believed her. Her secret? She claimed she could literally feel what the cells were doing. This wasn't intuition. It was a deep, obsessive empathy with her subject, the kind traditional science scoffed at. But here's the kicker. That same obsessive attention to detail, what some might mistake for mental imbalance, created one of the most groundbreaking shifts in our understanding of genetics. So maybe genius isn't about knowing the right answers. Maybe it's about having the stamina to keep asking the wrong questions until your mind finds the question no one else thought to ask. Because in the end, the true measure of intelligence might not be what you can recite or solve, but how far you're willing to go into the unknown when everyone else stops asking why. And that leads us to the final, unsettling truth. Intelligence is not a destination. It's a dangerous journey. One that often breaks before it builds, isolates before it inspires. The genius mind doesn't just think differently, it risks differently. It stares into cognitive chaos and dares to find order no one else can see. So why does this matter? Because right now, in classrooms, boardrooms, and bedrooms across the world, there are minds whose brilliance goes unrecognized, not for lack of talent, but for lack of fit. They don't check the usual boxes. They never will, and maybe they shouldn't have to. If we want the future to be built by visionaries and not by algorithms, we need to stop looking for the smartest person in the room and start noticing the one asking the weirdest questions. So here's the final question. What kind of intelligence are you ignoring? Even in yourself? Because here's the wildest part, there's no single blueprint for genius. Some minds break through with relentless logic, others through surreal imagination. Some grow from trauma, others from boredom, but in every case, true intelligence bypasses convention. It doesn't just operate outside the box, it often refuses to even acknowledge that a box exists. And that's why this conversation is urgent. As artificial intelligence rises and conformity gets algorithmically reinforced, the human spark, the chaotic, disobedient, deeply personal pursuit of truth, might be the rarest resource we have left. So, if genius hides where no one's looking, the next revolution won't come from a lab or a lecture. It will explode from the margins. From the misunderstood, the misdiagnosed, the misfit, maybe even from you. So maybe it's time we redefine what it means to be intelligent, not as a score, not as a title, but as a way of seeing, questioning, and creating. Intelligence isn't just what you know, it's how bravely you explore what you don't. It's the defiance to keep thinking differently when you're told to conform. It's the courage to follow an idea into the dark, not knowing if it'll lead somewhere miraculous or nowhere at all. So instead of chasing genius, maybe we should learn to recognize its fingerprints, in curiosity that won't quit, in obsessions that seem irrational, in people who feel out of place but are actually out in front. Because in a world obsessed with answers, real intelligence still starts with a question, and sometimes, the only thing standing between today and the next era of human awakening is someone willing to ask it. So what's the takeaway? Intelligence isn't a finish line, a number, or a label. It's a path, jagged and strange, lit by questions no one else dares to ask. And maybe that's the whole point. Because as long as we keep trying to squeeze genius into test scores and syllabi, we'll keep missing it. But if we start looking in the shadows and the odd fascinations, the slow starters, the daydreamers, the rule breakers, we might just find the minds that will change everything. So the next time a question haunts you, refuses to let go, or doesn't quite make sense, chase it. Follow it like your own personal compass into the unknown. That's not foolishness. That might just be the first step to waking up your inner genius. Because here's the truth no one tells you. The brain of a genius isn't neat, and it isn't polite. It's noisy, tangled, and restless. It breaks rules because it sees through them. And while the world keeps chasing polished resumes and perfect GPAs, genius is out there tunneling through problems no one has solved, asking absurd questions, and refusing to settle. It doesn't arrive with fanfare, it arrives misunderstood. So the question isn't whether genius exists among us, it's whether we're brave enough to recognize it, nurture it, and stop trying to tame it. Because the next world-altering idea isn't going to follow the rules, it's going to shatter them. And if that sounds messy, good. That's what real intelligence looks like from the inside. So let this be your invitation not just to admire genius from a distance, but to question your own definition of intelligence. What if the spark you've been chasing isn't in someone else's brain, but buried in your own messy, tangled thoughts? Maybe the next great idea won't come when you're trying to be smart, but when you're brave enough to ask the question that scares you, because in the end, genius isn't found by following a path, it's carved by those who dare to make their own. And if you've ever felt out of place, too curious, too intense, or too strange, you're not broken, you're searching. And that search, that relentless drive to understand, create, and challenge everything, might just mean your genius is already waking up. Don't silence it, feed it. So if you've made it this far, maybe it's because something deep inside you recognizes the spark. Maybe you've questioned the system, doubted the labels, felt out of sync with what the world defines as smart. That isn't a flaw, it's a signal. Genius doesn't ask for permission, it grows in silence, thrives on defiance, and waits patiently for someone to stop measuring and start listening. So here it is, your final challenge. Don't just be informed, be ignited. Let your questions grow louder than your doubts. Follow the weird thought. Write down the strange idea. Talk to the person no one understands. Because if intelligence truly works from the inside out, then the next extraordinary mind the world needs might just be yours. And maybe that's where the real genius lives, not in perfect logic or flawless memory, but in the quiet refusal to obey the obvious. It lives in people who feel things too deeply, who question what others accept, who never quite fit the mold. It lives in moments of friction, of misunderstanding, of stubborn wonder. So here's your reminder. The brain of a genius isn't a machine, it's a storm. One that disrupts, rewires, rebuilds, and in doing so, redefines what's possible. You don't have to wear the title to walk the path. Just be bold enough to follow the question. Because the next revolution won't be calculated. It will be imagined. And maybe, just maybe, it will start with you. So wherever you are, whether you're scribbling in a notebook, lost in thought during a commute, or just feeling like you think too differently to belong, remember this. Intelligence isn't found in how well you fit the mold, but in how bravely you challenge it. The world doesn't need more perfection. It needs more real. More restless minds willing to color outside the lines, to question loud assumptions, to fail gloriously, and keep going. That spark inside you, the weird thought you can't shake, the obsession you can't explain, the hunger to understand what no one else sees that could be more than curiosity. It could be the beginning of your genius. Don't ignore it, follow it. Because in a world drowning in noise, the clearest signal might just be the strange idea no one else dares to follow yet. And if that strange idea is still whispering to you, even now, take it seriously, scratch at it. Let it lead you into questions without answers, into books no one else is reading, into theories no one else believes in yet. Because every world-shifting breakthrough started with someone who didn't wait for permission. They followed the spark. So maybe, just maybe, the brain of a genius isn't built to conform, but to create cracks in the status quo where light can shine through. That light could start with one curious thought, the one you're still thinking about right now,